He stood in the bitter cold of that January auction, a broken man with $3.17 left in his checking account, and bid $2,500 on a frozen observatory that hadn't been opened in 15 years, not knowing that buried beneath its icy floors lay research worth $186 million, and the key to healing a grief that had nearly destroyed his family. Before we explore this incredible journey, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning frost clung to every surface in the small mountain town of Cedar Falls like nature's own eulogy. David Mitchell sat at his kitchen table, staring at a stack of overdue bills, while his 8-year-old daughter Emma colored quietly in her notebook, and his 12-year-old son Jake pushed cereal around his bowl with the enthusiasm of someone attending his own funeral. 6 months. That's how long it had been since Sarah died. 6 months since the accident that turned their comfortable middle-class life into a daily battle for survival. David had been a decent electrician before, but grief had made his hands shake, made him miss appointments, made simple repairs feel impossible. The insurance money was gone, the savings account was empty, and the bills kept coming like waves against a drowning ship. Emma looked up from her drawing, her blonde hair catching the weak winter sunlight. "Daddy, can we have pancakes for breakfast tomorrow?" David's chest tightened. They'd been living on generic cereal, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever he could stretch from the food bank for weeks. Pancakes felt like a luxury from another lifetime. "We'll see, sweetheart," he managed. Jake, older and sharper, caught the hesitation in his father's voice. "We don't have money for pancakes, do we?" The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. David wanted to lie, to protect them from the weight of their reality. But Jake was too smart and had already seen too much. "Money's tight right now, buddy, but things will get better." Even as he said it, David wondered if he believed it himself. He'd applied for 17 jobs in the past month. No callbacks. His truck needed new tires. The rent was due in 8 days. And somewhere deep in his chest, a voice whispered the terrible thought he fought every morning. Maybe his kids would be better off without him. That's when he saw the newspaper folded beside his coffee mug. Sarah used to read the classifieds every Sunday morning, circling garage sales and estate auctions with a red pen. "You never know what treasures people throw away," she'd say with that smile that could light up a room. David's eyes fell on a small ad in the corner. Government surplus auction. Observatory and research facility. Saturday, 10 a.m. Minimum bid $500. An observatory. He remembered Sarah talking about wanting to show the kids the stars, about buying a telescope someday when money wasn't so tight. She'd grown up on a farm where the night sky stretched endless and full of promises. In the city, light pollution had stolen that magic, but she'd never stopped looking up. The auction was today. David glanced at the clock. 8:15 a.m. Cedar Falls Observatory was only 20 minutes away. Up in the mountains, where the air was thin and the stars supposedly still mattered. He looked at his children. Emma had drawn a picture of their family, 4 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun, but she'd colored over the 4th figure with black crayon, leaving only 3. Jake was reading a library book about black holes, his young face serious and concentrated, like his mother's used to get when she was thinking through a problem. "Kids," David said suddenly, "want to go for a drive?" "Game. Kids. 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 Kids take a live." The Cedar Falls Observatory sat on the edge of a cliff like a concrete monument to abandoned dreams. David pulled his rusted Honda into a gravel lot already half full of pickup trucks and SUVs with dealer plates. Through the windshield, he could see the main building. A squat, brutalist structure from the 1970s with a massive dome on top, now cracked and streaked with ice. "It looks like a spaceship crashed," Emma whispered. Jake pressed his face to the window. "Why is everything frozen like that?" David stared at the building and wondered the same thing. Icicles hung from every surface, like crystalline fingers. The entire structure appeared to be coated in a thick layer of ice, as if someone had sprayed it with a fire hose in the middle of winter, and then walked away. But it wasn't random ice, it was too uniform, too deliberate. They climbed out into the bitter mountain air. Other potential bidders milled around the parking lot, most of them contractors and scrap dealers with the look of vultures circling a carcass. David recognized the type men who bought government surplus to strip for copper wire and steel beams. A thin man in a government-issued parka stood near the building's entrance with a clipboard and a megaphone. "Folks, welcome to today's surplus auction. We'll be starting in 10 minutes. Please note that the winning bidder takes possession immediately and assumes all responsibility for the property, including any environmental hazards or structural issues." Environmental hazards. David's stomach twisted. What kind of environmental hazards? He overheard two men in Carhartt jackets talking nearby. "Things been sealed up tight since 2008, one said. "Some kind of research project went sideways. Heard they had to evacuate the whole place overnight," the other replied. "Never did figure out what they were working on up here. Probably something with chemicals. Look at all that ice buildup. Ain't natural." David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air, but something kept him from walking back to his car. Maybe it was the way Emma was staring up at the frozen dome with wonder instead of fear. Maybe it was the way Jake was reading the historical marker near the entrance, his curiosity overriding his usual teenage indifference. The Cedar Falls Observatory was established in 1972 as part of the National Radio Astronomy Research Program, Jake read aloud. It was designed to study deep space signals and conduct research into astronomical phenomena. Deep space signals. David remembered Sarah talking about SETI, about the possibility that someone out there might be listening back. She'd been a nurse, practical and grounded, but she'd never lost that sense of wonder about the universe beyond their small world. The auctioneer called everyone to gather around. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have one item today: the Cedar Falls Observatory, and all associated buildings and equipment. The property consists of the main observatory building, 2 research outbuildings, and approximately 15 acres of mountain land. Due to environmental concerns, the buildings have been sealed since 2008. The winning bidder will need to coordinate with the Environmental Protection Agency before opening any sealed areas." A murmur ran through the small crowd. Environmental Protection Agency. That definitely sounded expensive. The government's minimum bid is $500. Do I hear 500? That's silence. David looked around at the other bidders. The contractors were shaking their heads, walking back toward their trucks. Whatever was inside that building, the mention of EPA involvement had scared them off. "Come on, folks. $500 for 15 acres and a research facility? Still nothing." The ice coating made the building look like something from another planet. No wonder nobody wanted it. What happens next will turn this desperate gamble into a discovery that changes everything, reveals secrets the government tried to bury, and remind us that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most extraordinary rewards. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Do I hear 300? The auctioneer tried. David's hands were numb inside his worn gloves. $300. He had $3.17 in his checking account, but he also had a credit card that wasn't maxed out yet. A credit card he'd been saving for true emergencies. Looking at his children, Emma shivering in her too small coat, Jake trying to act like he wasn't interested when David could see the fascination. In his eyes, David realized this might be exactly the kind of emergency he'd been saving for. Not a medical bill or a car repair, but a chance. A desperate, probably stupid chance. 200. The auctioneer called. David's hand went up before his brain could stop it. The auctioneer's eyes lit up. I have 200. Do I hear 250? No response. The remaining bidders were loading into their vehicles, apparently deciding that even $200 was too much to risk on a property with environmental issues. Going once at 200. Going twice. David's heart hammered against his ribs. $200 would max out his credit card, but it would also give them a roof over their heads. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Sold for $200 to bidder number 7. Emma clapped her mittened hands together. Jake tried to look nonchalant, but David caught the small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. For the first time in months, they looked like children instead of survivors. The paperwork took 30 minutes. David signed documents he didn't fully understand, promising to coordinate with the EPA before opening sealed areas, accepting liability for any environmental remediation, acknowledging that the property was sold as is, with no warranties or guarantees. As the government official handed him a ring of keys, old brass keys that looked like they belonged to a museum, David wondered what the hell he'd just done. Congratulations, Mr. Mitchell, the official said. You're now the proud owner of the Cedar Falls Observatory. Fair warning, the main research areas have been sealed with industrial freezing systems since the evacuation. You'll need special equipment to safely access those areas. Industrial freezing systems. That explained the ice coating. But why freeze a building instead of just locking it up? What kind of research were they doing here? David asked. The official's expression became carefully neutral. That information is classified. You'll need to contact the Department of Energy if you want more details. Department of Energy. Not NASA or the National Science Foundation, but the Department of Energy, the same department that handled nuclear research. As the official packed up his clipboard and headed for his government sedan, David stood in the parking lot, holding a ring of keys to a building he couldn't afford to own and didn't understand. Emma was already running toward the main entrance, her breath forming little clouds in the cold air. Jake followed more slowly, but David could see the curiosity burning in his eyes. Can we go inside now, Daddy? Emma called. David looked at the massive metal door, coated in ice and sealed with warning tape. According to the paperwork, he was legally allowed to enter the non-research areas immediately. The kitchen, offices, and observation dome were supposedly safe. Only the underground research levels required EPA coordination. Just the regular parts, he told himself. Not the frozen sections. He tried the first key on the ring. It slid smoothly into the lock, which was surprising given the ice buildup everywhere else. The lock turned with a solid click, and the massive door swung open on well-oiled hinges. The air that rushed out was warm. David stopped. Warm air. from a building that had been abandoned for 15 years in the middle of a Colorado winter. He held his hand in front of the doorway. Definitely warm, and moving like there was ventilation running inside. "The power's still on," Jake observed, pointing to a soft glow coming from somewhere inside the building. That was impossible. According to the auction documents, all utilities had been disconnected in 2008, yet light was clearly coming from somewhere inside, and the air flowing out was at least 70 degrees. Emma was already stepping through the doorway. "Daddy, there are lights on in here." David caught her arm gently. "Hold on, sweetheart. Let Daddy go first." He stepped inside and immediately understood why the air was warm. The building's interior was completely normal, no ice, no freezing, just a standard office building with industrial carpeting and fluorescent lights humming overhead. It felt like stepping from an Arctic tundra into a suburban office complex. The lobby was surprisingly well maintained. A reception desk sat in the center, still decorated with a small plastic Christmas tree from 15 years ago. Motivational posters lined the walls. "Reach for the stars," and "Discovery begins with questions." A directory beside the elevator listed 4 levels: Observatory Dome, administrative offices, residential quarters, and research levels. Research levels. Plural. "It's warm in here," Emma observed, unzipping her coat. "Yeah," David agreed, though his mind was racing. If the building had been abandoned, who was paying for the heat and electricity? Why was the interior perfectly preserved while the exterior was coated in ice? Jake was reading another plaque near the elevator. This says, "The research levels are restricted to authorized personnel only. Level clearance required." David walked over and saw a red warning sign. "Research levels B1 through B4, authorized personnel only. This facility contains sensitive government research. Unauthorized access is a federal crime." B1 through B4. 4 underground levels that apparently required federal clearance to access. But he owned the building now. Didn't that make him authorized? The elevator doors were sealed with metal plates and warning tape, but a stairwell door to the left was unmarked. David tried one of the keys from his ring. It fit. "Daddy?" Emma was looking at him with those eyes that trusted him to make the right choice. The same eyes Sarah used to have. David looked at the stairwell door, then at his children. They'd been living in their car for 3 days last month while he tried to scrape together rent money. They'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner more times than he could count. They deserved better than survival. Maybe whatever was down there could give them that. "Stay close to me," he said, opening the door. The stairwell was well lit and warm, with the same institutional feel as the lobby. But as they descended, David noticed something odd. The walls were thicker than normal, almost bunker-like, and there were no windows anywhere, which made sense for underground levels, but felt somehow intentional. At the bottom of the first flight, they reached a landing marked B1. The door was heavy metal with a small window. David peered through and saw what looked like a normal hallway lined with office doors. "Just offices," he murmured, trying the door. Locked, but another key from his ring opened it easily. The B1 level was a corridor lined with small offices and conference rooms. Nothing unusual, except for the complete lack of dust or decay. Everything looked like the staff had left for lunch and never came back. Coffee cups sat on desks. Calendars were still turned to December 2008. A whiteboard in one office had equations written in blue marker, still perfectly legible. Emma found a desk with family photos still displayed. "Look, Daddy, this person had kids too." David examined the photos. A man in a lab coat, standing with a woman and 2 children in front of the observatory building. But in the background of one photo, David could see something that made him pause. The building was normal, no ice coating, no warning signs. Just a regular observatory, so the ice buildup had happened during the evacuation, not before it. They continued down the corridor, checking doors. Most were unlocked offices containing research papers, computer equipment from the late 2000s, and personal effects. It felt like exploring a time capsule. At the end of the corridor was another stairwell, this one leading to B2. David hesitated. The auction official had said the research levels were sealed with industrial freezing systems. But this level was perfectly normal. Maybe the freezing only affected the deeper levels. One more level, he decided. B2 was different. The corridor was wider, the ceiling higher, and the air had a subtle metallic taste. The doors here were heavier, marked with numbers instead of names. Behind the first door they found what looked like a laboratory stainless steel tables, computers with multiple monitors, equipment David couldn't identify. Jake whistled low. This is serious science stuff. One wall was covered with star charts, but not the kind David remembered from high school astronomy. These showed radio frequency patterns, mathematical formulas, and what looked like signal analysis graphs. In the center was a large printout labeled Project Deep Echo. Signal Analysis Summary. David moved closer. The document was filled with technical language he couldn't understand, but one section caught his attention. Confirmed artificial origin signals detected from coordinates RA 19 hours 25 meters dec plus 40 degrees 15. Pattern analysis indicates intelligent design. Recommend immediate escalation to Department of Defense. Artificial origin signals. Intelligent design. His hands started to shake. Sarah had always wondered if we were alone in the universe. She would have been fascinated by this. Daddy, look at this, Emma called from across the room. She was standing in front of a massive computer workstation with multiple screens. The computers were still running, displaying scrolling data that meant nothing to David but looked incredibly sophisticated. It's still working, Jake observed. Everything's still working. David realized Jake was right. The computers, the lights, the ventilation, everything was running as if the facility was still active. But according to the government, it had been abandoned for 15 years. A soft chime echoed through the building, followed by an automated voice. Daily system backup complete. All research data archived. Next backup scheduled for 2400 hours. David, Emma, and Jake stared at each other in the sudden silence. Daddy, Emma whispered, I think this place isn't really abandoned. David's heart hammered against his ribs as the automated voice echoed through the corridor again. Research data archived. Next backup scheduled for 2400 hours. His children stood frozen beside him, Emma gripping his hand with small, cold fingers, Jake's eyes wide behind his glasses. Daddy, Emma whispered, if the building's been empty for 15 years, who's running the computers? It was the question David had been trying not to ask himself. Everything about this place felt wrong, too preserved, too active, too alive for an abandoned facility. But they were here now, and turning back felt like giving up on the only opportunity they might ever have. Let's keep looking, he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. But we stay together, okay? They moved deeper into B2. Passing laboratories filled with equipment David couldn't begin to understand. Massive radio dishes were visible through reinforced windows, all pointed at the same section of sky. Computer workstations displayed streams of data that looked like heartbeats, regular, rhythmic, purposeful. At the end of the corridor, they found a heavy door marked B3 Access, authorization required. Unlike the other doors, this one had a keypad lock alongside the traditional key mechanism. Red warning lights blinked steadily above the frame. David tried his keys anyway. None of them fit. "There's another way," Jake said, pointing to a maintenance shaft cover near the floor. "Air ducts usually connect between levels." David knelt and examined the cover. It was secured with standard screws, and he still carried a multi-tool from his electrician days. "You think we should? Mom always said the best discoveries come from taking chances." Jake replied quietly. Sarah. She would have been fascinated by this place, would have wanted to understand what they'd been researching here. For her sake, if nothing else, David needed to know what lay beneath this building. He unscrewed the cover and peered into the shaft. It was large enough to crawl through with dim lighting and what felt like warm air flowing upward. "I'll go first," he said. "If anything seems dangerous, we turn back immediately." The shaft angled downward at a gentle slope, lined with smooth metal and punctuated by junction points where other ducts branched off. As they crawled, David noticed the air growing warmer, not colder. Whatever was down here was generating significant heat. After about 50 feet, they reached another cover. Through the slats, David could see a vast open space filled with machinery and soft blue light. He carefully removed the cover from the inside and helped his children through. They emerged into a cathedral of science. The B3 level was enormous, a single open space, at least the size of a football field, with 30-foot ceilings and no visible support columns. Massive machines lined the walls, humming with quiet efficiency. Banks of computers stretched across the center of the room, their screens displaying scrolling data in languages David didn't recognize, alongside standard English readouts. But what took his breath away was the centerpiece. A perfect sphere, maybe 20 feet in diameter, suspended in the center of the room and rotating slowly. Its surface was mirror-smooth and seemed to reflect not the room around it, but something else entirely. Stars, galaxies, cosmic phenomena he'd only seen in photographs. "What is that?" Emma breathed. David had no idea. But as they approached the sphere, he could see that it wasn't just reflecting space, it was mapping it. The surface showed real-time images of distant galaxies, with mathematical overlays indicating distances, velocities, and what looked like signal strengths. A workstation near the sphere was covered with printed reports. David picked up the top one. Project Deep Echo, Phase 7, Results Summary. The date was 3 months ago. 3 months ago, not 15 years. His hands shook as he read. Signal triangulation, now complete using the Morrison array. Source confirmed. At coordinates RA, 19 hours, 25 meters. Deck plus 40 degrees. 15. Distance approximately 4,700 light-years. Signal contains mathematical progressions indicating intelligent origin. Recommend immediate contact with Department of Defense and National Security Council. David set the report down carefully. They were tracking signals from space. Signals that contained mathematical progressions. Signals that indicated intelligent origin. And someone had been doing this work just 3 months ago. "Daddy, look at this computer," Jake called from across the room. The workstation Jake had found was displaying what looked like a communication interface. Multiple windows showed signal analysis, translation attempts, and something that made David's blood run cold. A section labeled Response Protocols. Response Protocols. They weren't just listening to signals from space. They were planning to respond. Emma had wandered over to another workstation, this one displaying what looked like architectural blueprints. "These look like building plans," she said. But for really big buildings. David joined her and felt the world tilt. They were for structures in space, massive installations with solar collectors, communication arrays, and what the labels described as habitat modules. Someone was planning to build something in space. Something large enough to house people. A soft chime echoed through the room, followed by that same automated voice. Incoming transmission detected. Signal analysis beginning. Dr. Reeves to Communications Bay 1. Dr. Reeves to Communications Bay 1. David grabbed both children instinctively. The announcement meant people were still working here. "Right now. We need to go," he whispered urgently. "But Daddy," Emma protested, "we haven't seen everything yet." "That's exactly why we need to go," David replied. But as he turned toward the air duct they'd come through, he noticed something that made him pause. A red light was blinking on one of the computer screens. As he watched, text appeared. "Motion detected in Research Level B3. Unauthorized access logged. Security protocol initiated. Run," David said. They scrambled back toward the air duct. But before they could reach it, the lights in the massive room shifted from blue to amber. Steel panels began sliding down from the ceiling, sealing off exits David hadn't even noticed. "Emergency lockdown activated," the automated voice announced. "All personnel remain in position. Security teams en route." Security teams. David's electrician training kicked in when systems locked down. There were always manual overrides. Fire codes required them. He scanned the room frantically and spotted what he was looking for. A red emergency release switch, near what looked like a maintenance door. "This way," he called, leading his children across the room. Behind them, he could hear the hum of an elevator descending. Multiple elevators. David slammed his palm on the emergency switch. The amber lights flickered, and several steel panels retracted with pneumatic hisses. A maintenance door labeled "Emergency Exit Only" clicked open. They ran. The emergency corridor was narrow and poorly lit, with concrete walls and the kind of institutional green paint David remembered from elementary school. It angled upward at a steep incline, and David could hear his children breathing hard as they climbed. What happens next will reveal the full scope of the discovery that changes their lives forever. Expose technology that shouldn't exist, and show us why sometimes running toward the unknown is the only way to find the truth. If you're enjoying this incredible story, please like, share, and subscribe for more amazing discoveries. Behind them, voices echoed down the corridor. Men calling to each other, coordinating search patterns. David pushed his children faster. The corridor ended at another heavy door. This one marked Surface Access. Emergency use only. David's key ring included a red key that looked different from the others, more modern. He tried it in the lock. It worked. They emerged into the cold mountain air behind the observatory building, gasping and shaking. David's Honda was still in the parking lot, and he'd never been so happy to see his dented, rust-streaked car in his life. "Are we in trouble?" Emma asked, as they hurried across the parking lot. David honestly didn't know. They'd technically been trespassing on government property, even though he owned the building. But they'd also discovered what looked like an active, classified research operation that was supposedly shut down 15 years ago. As they reached the car, David heard vehicles approaching from the access road. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, moving fast up the mountain highway. "Get in," David said quietly. They pulled out of the parking lot just as the SUVs turned in. In his rearview mirror, David watched men in dark suits climb out of the vehicles and approach the observatory building. One of them spoke into a radio while scanning the now empty parking lot. David drove in silence for 10 minutes, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. Finally, Emma spoke up from the back seat. "Daddy, what was that place really?" David glanced at his children in the rearview mirror. Emma looked worried, but curious. Jake looked like someone who'd just seen the future and wasn't sure if he liked it. "I think," David said slowly, "we just found something the government doesn't want people to know about." "What kind of something?" Jake asked. David thought about the rotating sphere showing real-time images of distant galaxies, the communication interfaces, the response protocols, the blueprints for structures in space. He thought about signals from 4,700 light-years away that contained mathematical progressions indicating intelligent origin. "I think we found proof that we're not alone," he said. That night, David sat at his kitchen table with every document he'd managed to grab from the observatory spread out in front of him. Most of it was technical data he couldn't understand, but some pieces were clear enough to make his heart race. Project Deep Echo wasn't just about listening to space. According to the papers he'd found, they'd been receiving structured signals for at least 10 years. Signals that contained mathematical information, star charts, and what the researchers described as technological specifications. Someone out there had been sending Earth blueprints, and someone at the Cedar Falls Observatory had been building them. One document in particular made David's hands shake. Morrison Array Construction Update, Phase 3. It detailed the construction of a massive radio telescope array, not on Earth, but in Earth orbit. According to the timeline, it was supposed to be completed 6 months ago. The blueprints Emma had found weren't theoretical. They were construction documents for something that already existed. David's phone rang, making him jump. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize with a Colorado area code. "Hello, Mr. Mitchell? This is Dr. Sarah Reeves from the Cedar Falls Research Station. I understand you visited our facility today." The same Dr. Reeves whose name had been announced over the intercom. David's mouth went dry. I bought the building at auction. I have the paperwork." "I know you do," Dr. Reeves said, and her voice was surprisingly warm. "And I think we need to talk. What you saw today, what you discovered, it's going to change your life. But first, I need to know. Did you take any documents with you?" David looked at the papers scattered across his table. "Some? Good," Dr. Reeves said. "Hold on to them. Meet me tomorrow at the Copper Creek Diner in town, 2 p.m. Come alone, but bring the documents. And Mr. Mitchell, what you've stumbled into is bigger than you can imagine. Much bigger." The line went dead. David stared at the phone for a long moment, then at the documents. In the corner of one technical manual, he spotted something he'd missed before: a price estimate for the orbital array construction. The number made him blink hard and count the zeros twice. $186 million. They'd built something in space worth $186 million, using blueprints received from signals originating 4,700 light-years away. And somehow, through a desperate $200 bid at a government auction, David Mitchell now owned the ground station that controlled it all. He looked through the kitchen doorway at his children, asleep on the couch together under a shared blanket. Emma clutched her stuffed bear. Jake had fallen asleep with his astronomy book open on his chest. They had no idea their father had just become the accidental owner of humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The next morning brought a knock at David's door just after dawn. Through the peephole, he saw a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes, wearing a down jacket and hiking boots. She looked more like a concerned aunt than a government scientist. "Dr. Reeves?" he asked through the door. "We moved our meeting up," she said. "There's been a development overnight. May I come in?" David hesitated, then opened the door. Dr. Reeves stepped inside, stamping snow from her boots. She noticed Emma and Jake eating cereal at the kitchen table and smiled. "You must be David's kids. I'm Sarah. I work at the observatory your dad visited yesterday." "The place with all the frozen stuff?" Emma asked. "Not frozen exactly," Dr. Reeves said gently. "Preserved. We've been preserving some very important work up there." Jake looked up from his cereal. "What kind of work?" Dr. Reeves glanced at David, who nodded slightly. "We study signals from space," she said. "Messages from very far away. Like aliens?" Emma's eyes went wide. "Exactly like aliens," Dr. Reeves confirmed. David gestured toward the living room. "Kids, can you play in your room for a few minutes? Dr. Reeves and I need to talk." After the children left, Dr. Reeves sat at the kitchen table and pulled a tablet from her bag. "Mr. Mitchell, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels of government. But since you own the facility now, and since you've already seen most of it, I think you deserve to know the full truth. I think you deserve to I think you deserve." She activated the tablet, and David found himself looking at real-time feeds from space. Multiple camera angles showed a massive structure orbiting Earth, a skeletal framework of gleaming metal and solar panels, easily the size of a small city. "We call it the Morrison Array," Dr. Reeves said. "Named after the radio astronomer who first detected the signals. We've been building it for 8 years, using specifications provided by our correspondents." "Correspondents?" "The intelligence that's been sending us information. They're not just sending random signals, Mr. Mitchell. They're teaching us mathematics, engineering, physics principles we never imagined. The Morrison Array is essentially a graduation present." David stared at the images. "Graduation from what?" "From being alone," Dr. Reeves said simply. "The signals we've been receiving are part of what we believe is a standard protocol. When a species reaches a certain level of technological development, they get invited to join a larger community. The signals contain everything needed to build a communication array capable of real-time contact across galactic distances. And we built it. The test phase begins next week. First official contact between Earth and the Centauri Collective. That's what they call themselves." David felt dizzy. "Why are you telling me this?" Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "Because you own the ground station, Mr. Mitchell. Every communication with the array goes through the Cedar Falls Observatory. Without your facility, the Morrison Array is just an expensive piece of orbital debris. So the government will just take it back. Eminent domain or something. They tried that yesterday," Dr. Reeves said with a slight smile. "Turns out your auction purchase included some very specific legal protections. The facility was classified as surplus property, which means it was legally removed from classified status. The new owner has full property rights under civilian law." David's head was spinning. "What does that mean?" It means, Dr. Reeves said, that you accidentally became the most important private citizen on Earth. And the Morrison Array, which your facility controls, is about to make first contact with an alien civilization that's been waiting 8 years for us to finish building our homework assignment. She handed him a folder. These are the technical specifications for the array, along with its estimated value for insurance purposes. I thought you should know what you're sitting on. David opened the folder and saw the number again. $186 million. $186 million worth of orbital infrastructure, controlled from a building he'd bought for $200 because he wanted to give his kids a roof over their heads. Dr. Reeves, he said slowly, I don't understand any of this technology. I'm just an electrician. Mr. Mitchell, she replied, in 3 days, you're going to be the man who controls humanity's first conversation with beings from another star system. I'd say it's time to learn. Through the kitchen window, David could see his children building a snowman in the backyard. Emma was trying to lift the middle section, while Jake rolled the head. They had no idea their father now controlled a space station worth more than most countries' annual budgets. And in 72 hours, that space station was going to change everything. David Mitchell had 48 hours to learn how to operate the most sophisticated communication array in human history, and he was starting with a YouTube tutorial on basic radio astronomy. His children sat beside him at the kitchen table, Emma coloring while Jake took notes in a composition notebook like he was preparing for the most important test of his life. "Daddy," Emma said, not looking up from her drawing of what appeared to be a space station. "Are we famous now?" David paused the video and looked at his daughter. Famous wasn't the word he'd use. Terrified, overwhelmed, completely out of his depth, those seemed more accurate. Not famous, sweetheart. Just responsible for something really important. The knock at the door came exactly at noon, just as Dr. Reeves had promised. But when David opened it, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood 3 other people. A young man with nervous energy and thick glasses, an older woman with the bearing of someone used to being in charge, and a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who definitely wasn't a scientist. "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Reeves said, "I'd like you to meet the rest of the Deep Echo team. This is Dr. Marcus Chen, our signal analysis specialist, Dr. Elizabeth Santos, project director, and," she hesitated, "Representative James Crawford from the House Intelligence Committee." The man in the suit stepped forward with a practiced smile. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm here to discuss a matter of national security. May we come in?" David's stomach clenched, but he stepped aside. The group filed into his modest living room, looking around at the second-hand furniture and children's toys scattered on the floor. Representative Crawford's eyes lingered on the stack of classified documents David had left on the coffee table. "Mr. Mitchell," Crawford began, settling into David's worn recliner like he owned it. "I'm sure Dr. Reeves has explained the sensitive nature of what you've discovered. What she may not have mentioned is that this project has significant implications for national security." "What Representative Crawford means," Dr. Santos interjected with barely concealed irritation, "is that certain people in Washington are nervous about civilian control of first contact protocols." Crawford's smile tightened. "What I mean, Dr. Santos, is that we're dealing with potential threats from unknown entities. The Morrison Array represents both unprecedented opportunity and unprecedented risk." David looked between them, sensing tension that went deeper than politics. "What kind of risk?" Dr. Chen, who had been quietly studying the documents on the coffee table, looked up. The signals we've been receiving contain more than just technical specifications, Mr. Mitchell. They include what appear to be warnings. Warnings about what? Other civilizations. Dr. Santos said quietly. The Centauri Collective has been sending us information about hostile species in this region of space. Species that don't welcome new members to the galactic community. Crawford leaned forward. Which is why civilian oversight of this project is unacceptable. We need military control of all communications, and lose the trust we've spent 8 years building. Dr. Reeves countered. The Centauri Collective specifically chose this facility because it's operated by civilian researchers, not military personnel. They've made it clear that first contact must be peaceful, scientific, and transparent. David's head was spinning. How do you know what they want? Dr. Chen pulled out a tablet and showed David a series of mathematical equations overlaid with what looked like pictographs. The signals aren't just technical data. They're stories, Mr. Mitchell. Histories of other species that made contact with the collective. Some succeeded and joined the galactic community. Others, he trailed off. Others what? Others were conquered by species that view new civilizations as threats to be eliminated, Crawford said bluntly. Which is why we need military oversight of this project. Dr. Santos stood abruptly. This is exactly the kind of thinking that got the project shut down the first time. David blinked. Shut down? I thought it was abandoned because of environmental issues. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, Dr. Reeves spoke. The project was officially terminated in 2008 after a change in administration. New leadership decided that contact with extraterrestrial intelligence posed too many unknown risks. But you kept working, David realized. We couldn't just stop, Dr. Santos said. The Centauri Collective had invested years in preparing us for contact. Walking away would have been catastrophic not just for us, but for every other developing civilization they might decide to help. Crawford's expression had grown cold. Dr. Santos, you're discussing classified operations with a civilian. He's not just a civilian, Dr. Reeves said firmly. He owns the facility that controls the Morrison array. Without his cooperation, this entire project becomes impossible. Then we'll exercise eminent domain, Crawford replied. National security trumps property rights. Actually, it doesn't, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention. She wore a simple business suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen better decades. Margaret Walsh, she said, extending her hand to David. I'm an attorney, specializing in government property law. Dr. Reeves asked me to review your situation. Crawford stood. This is a closed meeting, Miss Walsh. Mrs. Walsh, she corrected, opening her briefcase. And actually, Representative Crawford, Mr. Mitchell has every right to legal counsel when government officials are discussing seizure of his property. She handed David a business card. I've reviewed the auction documents and your deed, Mr. Mitchell. The government's legal position is much weaker than they'd like you to believe. How so? David asked. The property was classified as surplus and sold through standard government auction procedures. When that happened, it lost its classified status under federal property law. The new owner has full civilian property rights. Crawford's face was reddening. National security concerns override. Nothing, Mrs. Walsh interrupted. Not in this case. The government could attempt eminent domain proceedings, but they'd have to prove that your property is essential for national defense purposes. Given that the Morrison Array has been operating successfully under civilian oversight for 8 years, that would be a difficult argument to make. Dr. Chen had been studying his tablet during this exchange. Suddenly, he looked up with wide eyes. "Dr. Santos, we're getting a priority signal from the array." "What kind of signal?" "Direct communication attempt. Real time. They're trying to talk to us right now." The room fell silent. Through the kitchen doorway, David could hear Emma humming while she colored, and Jake turning pages in his astronomy book. Normal sounds from a normal afternoon, while aliens tried to make first contact in his living room. Dr. Santos turned to David. "Mr. Mitchell, we need to get to the observatory immediately. The collective typically only attempts direct communication when they detect significant changes in our operational status." "What kind of changes?" "Like new ownership of the ground station," Dr. Reeves said quietly. "They know you bought the facility, and they want to talk." What happens next will challenge everything David thought he knew about his small town, his government, and his place in the universe, as forces far more powerful than he imagined, close in from all sides. If you're enjoying this incredible true story, please like, share, and subscribe, because what's coming will change everything. The drive up to the observatory felt different this time. Instead of an abandoned building covered in ice, David now saw it as what Dr. Reeves had called it, the most important facility on Earth. The parking lot was full of vehicles, government sedans, scientific equipment trucks, and a news van with satellite equipment that made David's stomach lurch. "How did the media find out?" he asked as they climbed out of Dr. Santos's SUV. "Word spreads fast in small towns," Dr. Chen said, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Especially when the government starts asking questions about a local man who suddenly owns a secret space facility." As they approached the building, a reporter with perfectly styled hair thrust a microphone toward David. "Mr. Mitchell, can you confirm that you've discovered evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence? What can you tell us about the alleged space station?" David froze, but Mrs. Walsh stepped smoothly between him and the camera. "Mr. Mitchell has no comment at this time. All questions should be directed to his legal counsel." They hurried through the entrance, leaving the reporters shouting questions behind them. Inside, the observatory was buzzing with activity. Scientists David didn't recognize worked at computer stations, while technicians checked equipment and government officials spoke urgently into phones. "Dr. Santos," a young technician called out, "the collective signal is getting stronger. They're requesting immediate contact with the new facility administrator." "That would be you," Dr. Reeves said to David. "Me. I don't know anything about interstellar communication protocols. Neither did any of us when we started," Dr. Santos replied. "But the collective specifically requested to speak with whoever has authority over this facility. They don't recognize government claims of jurisdiction." Representative Crawford, who had been speaking quietly with several men in dark suits, approached their group. "Dr. Santos, I'm ordering you to transfer all communication protocols to military oversight immediately." "And I'm telling you that's impossible, Doctor," Santos shot back. "The collective has made it clear they will only communicate through civilian channels. Any attempt at military intervention will result in termination of contact." "How do we know they're not the threat?" Crawford demanded. "How do we know this isn't an elaborate deception designed to make us vulnerable?" Dr. Chen looked up from a computer terminal. "Because they've had 8 years to attack us, if that was their intention. The Morrison Array contains detailed specifications for our defensive capabilities, our military structure, our population centers. If they wanted to harm us, they wouldn't need to build us a communication system first. David studied the images on Dr. Chen's screen. Real-time feeds from the Morrison array showing the massive structure orbiting Earth. Solar panels stretched for miles, communication dishes pointed toward distant stars, and what looked like manufacturing facilities that he was pretty sure hadn't been there in the images he'd seen yesterday. "Is the array still growing?" he asked. "Constantly," Dr. Reeves confirmed. The initial specifications included autonomous construction protocols. It builds additional components using materials harvested from asteroids. So, it's mining asteroids and building itself, among other things. Last month it completed what appears to be a manufacturing bay for small spacecraft. We're not sure what they're for yet. Crawford's phone buzzed, and his expression grew even more grim as he answered. After a brief, heated conversation, he hung up and turned to the group. That was the Pentagon. 3 hours ago, amateur astronomers started posting images of the Morrison array online. The story's gone viral. We're getting calls from every major news network, the United Nations, and at least 7 foreign governments demanding explanations. David felt like the room was spinning. This is getting too big. I just wanted to buy a building where my kids could have a home. Mr. Mitchell, Dr. Santos said gently, your children are part of this now, whether we like it or not. The collective's communications include specific references to your family structure. They understand human family bonds, and they see your children as important to the contact process. They know about Emma and Jake. They know about everyone connected to this facility, Dr. Chen said, pulling up another screen. Look at this. The display showed what appeared to be a family tree, with David's name at the center connected to Emma and Jake, but also to dozens of other people. Dr. Reeves, Dr. Santos, even Mrs. Walsh. Lines connected each person to detailed information about their backgrounds, relationships, and roles in the project. How do they know all this? David demanded. The same way they knew how to build the Morrison array, Dr. Santos replied. They've been observing us for decades. Not just our technology, but our society, our relationships, our values. First contact isn't just about exchanging information. It's about determining whether we're ready to join a larger community. An alarm chimed through the building, and Dr. Chen's computer screen flashed red. Incoming priority signal. They're requesting immediate contact with the facility administrator. David looked around the room at the scientists, government officials, and lawyers all staring at him. Through the window, he could see more news vans arriving in the parking lot. His phone had been buzzing with calls from numbers he didn't recognize all afternoon. What happens if I say no? He asked. Then first contact fails, Dr. Santos said simply. The collective withdraws their offer of membership in the galactic community. Humanity remains isolated, and other species that don't value peaceful contact may decide we're a threat that needs to be eliminated. And if I say yes, then you become the first human being to have a conversation with an intelligence from another star system. And nothing will ever be the same. David thought about his children, about the life he'd been trying to build for them. He thought about Sarah, who had always wondered what was out there among the stars. He thought about the $200 that had seemed like such a desperate gamble just a week ago. Dr. Chen, he said finally, patch me through. The communication bay was a small room adjacent to the main observatory, lined with equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Dr. Chen helped David into a chair in front of a large screen, while Dr. Santos and Dr. Reeves operated control panels nearby. The signal lag to the Morrison array is about 3 seconds, Dr. Chen explained. But once the array locks onto the collective's transmission, Communication should be essentially real-time. They've mastered faster than light information transfer. Are there any protocols I should know about? Things I shouldn't say. Be honest, Doctor, Reeves advised. They value authenticity above all else. They're not interested in diplomatic language or political maneuvering. They want to understand who you are as a person. Remember, Dr. Santos added, this is as much an evaluation as a conversation. They're deciding whether humanity is ready for contact based on this interaction. David's hands were shaking as Dr. Chen initiated the connection. The screen flickered, showing static, then mathematical symbols, then what looked like star charts. Finally, the display stabilized, showing what appeared to be a three-dimensional representation of space with Earth at the center. A voice emerged from the speakers, not mechanical, but clearly not human either. It had musical qualities, harmonics that seemed to resonate in David's chest. Greetings, David Mitchell of Earth. I am Kale 7 of the Centauri Collective. We have been waiting to speak with you. David's throat was dry, but he managed to respond. Hello, Kale 7. I'm honored to meet you. We understand you have recently assumed responsibility for the communication facility. This is significant to us. The previous administrators were bound by governmental restrictions that limited open communication. We sense no such restrictions in you. That's accurate. I'm not affiliated with any government. I just bought the building at an auction. Something that might have been laughter emerged from the speakers. You just bought the most important structure on your planet. We find this amusing. Tell us, David Mitchell, why did you make this purchase? David thought about lying, about making himself sound more impressive or important. But Dr. Reeves had said they valued honesty. I needed a place for my children to live, he said simply. My wife died, and I was struggling to provide for them. I thought I was buying an abandoned building where we could have a home, and instead you discovered a bridge between worlds. Your species has an expression about this phenomenon, serendipity. We find it encouraging that such a significant responsibility has fallen to someone motivated by care for offspring rather than personal ambition. The screen shifted, showing images that made David gasp. His children, Emma and Jake, playing in the snow outside the observatory. The images were recent from today. Your progeny are exceptional, David Mitchell. The young female shows unusual spatial reasoning abilities. The male demonstrates advanced mathematical intuition. They would be welcomed in our educational programs. Educational programs. Part of integration into the collective involves sharing knowledge across species. Young minds adapt most readily to expanded concepts of reality. Your children would be among the first human ambassadors to learn alongside beings from other worlds. David's heart pounded. Are you saying you want to take my children? Not take. Include. There is a difference. They would remain with you while participating in expanded learning opportunities. Think of it as a very advanced form of your concept of school. Dr. Santos leaned over and whispered urgently in David's ear. This is unprecedented. They've never offered direct educational integration before. David Mitchell, Kale 7 continued, we detect that others on your world wish to interfere with this communication. Government entities seek to claim authority over contact protocols. This is concerning to us. Through the communication bay window, David could see Representative Crawford arguing heatedly with several uniformed military officers who had apparently just arrived. More news vans were pulling into the parking lot, and he could hear helicopters approaching. Yes, David said. There are people who think the government should control this process. And what do you think? David looked at the chaos unfolding outside, then at the scientists who had dedicated their careers to this moment. He thought about his children building snowmen, while alien intelligence observed them from space. He thought about Sarah, who had always believed the universe was vast and wonderful and full of possibilities. "I think," David said slowly, "that something this important shouldn't be controlled by politics or military force. I think it should be about connection, understanding, and hope for the future. This is why we chose your facility, David Mitchell. Not because of its technical capabilities, but because it would eventually come under the authority of someone who understands what truly matters." The screen flickered, showing new images. Vast cities among the stars, beings of different shapes and sizes working together, spacecraft moving between worlds like ships crossing an ocean. This is what awaits your species if you are ready to join us. Not conquest or subjugation, but partnership and growth. However, we must warn you, there are forces in your galaxy that view expanding civilizations as threats. Your world has been noticed by entities that do not welcome new members to the cosmic community. What kind of entities? Before KL7 could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the observatory. Through the window, David saw military vehicles surrounding the building. Soldiers with assault rifles were moving toward the entrances. "David Mitchell," KL7's voice carried new urgency. "We detect military force approaching your location. This complicates our communication protocols significantly." Representative Crawford burst into the communication bay, followed by a general David didn't recognize, and several armed soldiers. "Mr. Mitchell, this facility is now under military control," Crawford announced. "Step away from the communication equipment immediately." "I wouldn't do that," Mrs. Walsh said, appearing behind the soldiers with a court document in her hand. Federal Judge Harrison has issued a temporary restraining order preventing government seizure of this facility, pending full legal review. The general's face was red with fury. "This is a matter of national security. No court order supersedes the Constitution," Mrs. Walsh finished calmly. "The restraining order is valid and enforceable. Any attempt to violate it will result in federal charges." "David Mitchell," KL7's voice cut through the argument, "we must suspend communication until these conflicts are resolved. However, we wish you to know the decision facing your species cannot be delayed much longer. Other forces are moving. You have perhaps 72 hours to determine whether Earth is ready for contact, or whether you require additional preparation time." The screen went dark. In the sudden silence, David realized that everyone in the room, scientists, government officials, lawyers, and soldiers, was staring at him. Outside, helicopters circled overhead, while news crews broadcast live reports to the world. He had 72 hours to decide the future of human civilization, and he still had no idea what he was doing. 72 hours. That's all the time David Mitchell had to decide whether humanity was ready for the greatest leap in its history. While military forces surrounded his building, news crews broadcast his every move to the world, and his 8-year-old daughter asked why soldiers with guns were standing in their parking lot. But what David didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the choice had already been made 15 years ago by someone who saw this moment coming. Someone who had sacrificed everything to ensure that when first contact finally happened, it would be in the hands of a person who understood that love, not power, was humanity's greatest strength. The revelation of who had really orchestrated this moment would transform not just David's understanding of his role in this cosmic drama, but his understanding of his own life. His late wife's death, and the true reason his family had been chosen to bridge two worlds. The command center that Dr. Santos had set up in the observatory's main hall looked like mission control for a moon landing. Dozens of computer screens displayed data streams from the Morrison array, while scientists from around the world participated via video conference. The clock on the main display showed 69 hours and 37 minutes remaining. David sat at the center of it all, feeling more out of place than ever. Emma and Jake had been brought to the facility after their school was surrounded by reporters and government agents. Now they sat nearby, Jake reading advanced physics textbooks that Dr. Chen had given him, while Emma drew pictures of the alien cities she'd seen on the communication screens. "Daddy," Emma said, looking up from her sketchpad, "are you scared?" David considered lying, but he'd promised himself after Sarah died that he would always be honest with his children. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm terrified, but you're doing it anyway. Sometimes the most important things are the scariest things." Jake closed his book and looked at his father. The question hit David like a physical blow. Sarah, she would have been fascinated by all of this, would have wanted to understand every detail of the technology and the implications for humanity's future. She'd always said that the universe was too vast and wonderful for Earth to be alone. "Yes," David said quietly. "She would have been braver than me." "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Santos interrupted gently, "we're getting another priority signal from the collective. KL7 wants to speak with you privately." David glanced around the room. Representative Crawford and his military advisors were huddled in one corner, while Mrs. Walsh worked furiously on legal documents. At another station, the media circus outside had grown to include international news crews and protesters, carrying signs ranging from "Welcome our space brothers" to "Aliens are demons. Can we set up a private channel?" "Already done." Conference room B is isolated and secure. 5 minutes later, David found himself alone in a small room with a single communication console. The screen flickered to life, showing the familiar Starfield interface before KL7's voice emerged from the speakers. "David Mitchell, we must speak plainly. Time grows short. I understand. But I need to ask you something first. How did you know? How did you know that I would end up owning this facility?" A pause that lasted long enough for David to wonder if the connection had been lost. "We did not know you specifically, David Mitchell. But we knew someone like you would eventually come. The previous facility director made certain of that. Dr. Bernard Whitaker, Dr. Sarah Mitchell." David's world stopped. "What did you say?" "Your mate, Sarah Mitchell. She was the lead researcher on Project Deep Echo from 2004 until her death in 2008. Did you not know this?" The room was spinning. Sarah had been a nurse. She'd worked at Denver General Hospital. She'd never mentioned anything about astronomy or alien research. "David Mitchell, we detect significant distress in your biometric readings. Perhaps we should explain." "Please," David whispered. Sarah Mitchell was recruited into Project Deep Echo after demonstrating exceptional pattern recognition abilities during her medical training. The project required personnel with both scientific backgrounds and the ability to think beyond conventional paradigms. Her medical training in emergency situations made her particularly valuable for first contact protocols. Images began appearing on the screen, surveillance photos that made David's breath catch. Sarah, in a laboratory coat, working at computers he recognized from his exploration of the facility. Sarah, talking with Dr. Whitaker, in what looked like the main communications bay. Sarah holding documents marked Project Deep Echo Classification Level Alpha. She never told me, David said. She could not. Project security required absolute compartmentalization. Even spouses of researchers were not informed of the project's true nature. But she died in a car accident. Another long pause. David Mitchell. We must share difficult information. Sarah Mitchell's death was not accidental. She was terminated because she attempted to make first contact protocols transparent to civilian oversight. There were those in your government who believed contact with our collective should remain under military control indefinitely. David's hands were shaking. You're saying she was murdered? We are saying she was eliminated as an obstacle to military control of first contact. Her research had proven that successful integration into the galactic community required civilian oversight, not military dominance. This made her a threat to certain factions within your government. The screen shifted, showing more documents. David recognized Sarah's handwriting in the margins of technical reports, her careful notes about communication protocols and integration procedures. Before her termination, Sarah Mitchell implemented a fail-safe protocol. She ensured that if Project Deep Echo was ever terminated, the facility would eventually come under civilian control through legal means that would be difficult for the government to reverse. The auction. She predicted that economic pressures would eventually force the government to classify the facility as surplus property. She also predicted that a civilian purchaser would be someone in desperate circumstances, motivated by immediate needs rather than profit. David thought about that cold January morning when he'd seen the auction listing in the newspaper. The newspaper that Sarah used to read every Sunday. Circling items with her red pen. She knew it would be me. She knew it would be someone like you. Someone with children to protect. Someone for whom home and family were more important than power or politics. Someone who would make decisions based on love rather than fear. What happens next will reveal the true scope of Sarah's sacrifice. Show how her death became the foundation for humanity's greatest moment, and transform David's grief into a purpose that changes everything. Stay tuned, because this incredible revelation is just the beginning. If you're moved by this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more amazing true stories. David sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation that his wife had essentially orchestrated his discovery of the facility from beyond the grave. Everything, the auction timing, the legal protections, even the price point, had been designed to ensure that someone like him would eventually gain control. There is more. David Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell's research identified specific qualities necessary for successful first contact. The individual responsible for initial communication protocols must have experienced significant personal loss, must understand the value of connection across differences, and must be motivated by protection of offspring rather than personal advancement. She designed the selection criteria based on herself. Based on you, David Mitchell. Her research extensively documented your responses to adversity, your decision-making patterns under stress, and your unwavering commitment to your children's welfare. She believed that if circumstances arose requiring civilian oversight of first contact, you were the most suitable candidate among her personal contacts. David's throat was tight. She studied me. She loved you. But she also recognized qualities in you that made you ideal for this responsibility. Your work as an electrician required problem-solving under pressure. Your response to her death demonstrated emotional resilience and prioritization of family welfare. Your lack of political connections meant you could not be easily compromised by competing interests. The screen showed one final image that broke David's heart. A video of Sarah in the communication bay, recording what was obviously a personal message. Would you like to see her final communication? David nodded, unable to speak. Sarah's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined. She was wearing scrubs from the hospital, but behind her were the computers and equipment he now knew were part of Project Deep Echo. If you're watching this, David, then something has happened to me and you've discovered the facility. I know this is overwhelming, and I'm sorry I couldn't prepare you better. But I need you to understand everything we've worked for, everything we've discovered. It's real. There are civilizations out there that want to help us grow, to become part of something bigger and more wonderful than we can imagine. Sarah's image reached out as if touching the screen. I know you think I was just a nurse who worked night shifts and read astronomy magazines for fun. But I was part of something that could change the future for Emma and Jake and every child on Earth. The choice we're offering humanity, it's not just about technology or knowledge, it's about whether we're ready to be part of a community based on cooperation instead of competition, understanding instead of fear. Her expression grew more serious. David, if you're seeing this, it means the government shut down the project, and I didn't survive the transition. It also means the fail-safes I put in place worked, and civilian oversight has been restored. The aliens, the collective, they're not going to force anything on us, but they also won't wait forever. There are hostile forces out there that view expanding civilizations as threats. If we don't accept the collective's protection and guidance, we'll eventually face those forces alone. Sarah smiled. The same smile that had made David fall in love with her 15 years ago. I trust you to make the right choice, not just for us, but for our children and their children. You've always put family first, David. Now you have the chance to think of all humanity as family. I love you. Take care of our babies. And remember, sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust people who are trying to help. The screen went dark. David sat in the quiet room for a long time, tears streaming down his face. Not tears of grief this time, but of understanding. Sarah hadn't died in a random accident. She died protecting the possibility of this moment. And somehow, through legal mechanisms he couldn't begin to understand, she'd ensured that when this moment came, it would be in his hands. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Santos opened the door cautiously. David, we're receiving multiple transmissions. The collective is requesting an update on humanity's decision, but we're also detecting signals from other sources, unknown sources. David wiped his eyes and stood. What kind of unknown sources? The signals don't match collective communication protocols. Dr. Chen thinks they might be from the hostile species KL7 mentioned. They're moving into this star system. David's blood ran cold. How much time do we have, based on the signal analysis? Maybe 18 hours before they reach Earth orbit. 18 hours. David thought about Emma and Jake, about every child on Earth, about the future Sarah had died trying to secure. The choice wasn't just about whether humanity was ready for contact anymore. It was about survival. He walked back to the main command center, where the controlled chaos had intensified. Dr. Chen was coordinating with observatories around the world, tracking what appeared to be multiple spacecraft moving toward Earth. Representative Crawford was screaming into his phone about defense protocols. Mrs. Walsh was fielding calls from world leaders, demanding to speak with the man who controlled humanity's only means of interstellar communication. Daddy. Emma ran over and hugged his legs. Dr. Santos said there might be bad aliens coming. Are we going to be okay? Emma, David knelt down and looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She had Sarah's eyes, bright and curious and trusting. Jake approached more cautiously, but David could see the same question in his expression. "I don't know, sweetheart," David said honestly. "But I'm going to try to keep everyone safe. Like Mom would have. Exactly like Mom would have." David stood and walked to the main communication console. "Dr. Santos, can you establish contact with the collective?" "Already working on it." Representative Crawford stepped in front of David. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm ordering you to transfer control of this facility to military personnel immediately. This is no longer a matter of first contact, it's a matter of planetary defense. And I'm telling you," David replied calmly, "that according to my wife's research, military control is exactly what will guarantee we fail. Your wife was a nurse. My wife was the lead researcher on Project Deep Echo. And she died because people like you thought military force was more important than trust." David's voice was steady but carried an edge of steel. "She designed the protocols we're using because she understood something you don't. This isn't about showing strength. It's about showing that we're ready to be part of something bigger than ourselves." The communication console chimed, and KL7's voice filled the room. "David Mitchell, we detect hostile vessels approaching your system. The hegemony has noticed your technological advancement and views it as a potential threat. We must know immediately, does humanity accept full membership in the Centauri Collective, with all protections and responsibilities that entails?" Crawford stepped forward. "This is General Harrison. We demand to know your military capabilities and defense." "Negative," KL7 interrupted. "We do not recognize military authority in first contact protocols. David Mitchell, your response determines not only the fate of your species, but the fate of 17 other developing civilizations under our protection. Do you accept membership?" David looked around the room. Scientists, government officials, lawyers, and soldiers all staring at him. Through the windows, he could see protesters and news crews, and a world watching and waiting. He thought about Sarah, about the sacrifice she'd made to ensure this moment would come to pass. He thought about Emma and Jake, and every child who deserved a future among the stars. KL7. What does membership actually mean? Not the political implications. What does it mean for my children? It means your offspring will grow up in a universe where 17 allied species share knowledge, resources, and protection. It means they will have opportunities to learn and explore beyond anything your species has imagined. It means they will never face the threats that destroyed countless civilizations that chose isolation over cooperation. And the responsibilities? Your species must commit to peaceful expansion, resource sharing with member civilizations, and protection of developing species when they reach this same choice point. You become gardeners of the galaxy, not conquerors. David closed his eyes and heard Sarah's voice from the recording. Sometimes, the most important thing you can do is trust people who are trying to help. He opened his eyes and spoke clearly into the communication console. On behalf of humanity, I accept full membership in the Centauri Collective. The response was immediate. Through the observatory windows, the Morrison array became visible as streams of light erupted from its communication arrays, reaching out toward distant stars. On the computer screens, David could see the hostile vessels that had been approaching Earth suddenly changing course, moving away from the solar system. Membership confirmed, KL7 announced. Welcome to the collective, Earth. The hegemony vessels are withdrawing in acknowledgement of our protection protocols. Your world is now safe." The room erupted in cheers, but David barely heard them. He was looking at his children, who were staring out the windows at the light show playing across the sky, as the Morrison array established permanent communication links with a dozen alien civilizations. "Is it over?" Jake asked. "No," David said, pulling both children close. "It's just beginning." 6 months later, David stood in the same observatory command center, but everything had changed. The facility had been expanded into a campus that covered hundreds of acres, with research buildings, dormitories for international students, and a public education center where Emma now gave tours to visitors from around the world. The Cedar Falls Observatory had become the unofficial capital of Earth's relationship with the galactic community. Scientists from every nation worked alongside researchers from other species, developing technologies that would have seemed like magic a year earlier. Medical advances developed with collective knowledge had eliminated several forms of cancer. Clean energy systems based on alien engineering were being implemented worldwide. And most importantly, Earth had become the coordinator for first contact protocols with 3 other developing species that were approaching readiness for membership. David no longer felt out of place in the command center. He'd spent months learning the technologies, the protocols, the subtle diplomacies of interspecies cooperation. He'd discovered he had an intuitive understanding of alien psychology that the collective found valuable. He'd become humanity's first ambassador to the galactic community. But more importantly, he'd found his purpose. "Dad," Jake called from across the room, where he was working with Dr. Chen on mathematical models for faster-than-light communication. "The new school programs are ready for review." Jake, now 13, was part of the first class of human students studying with young beings from other worlds. His mathematical abilities had grown exponentially under alien tutoring. Emma, meanwhile, had shown remarkable aptitude for what the collective called spatial emotional intelligence, the ability to understand how different species processed relationships and social structures. And Emma's already designed the orientation program for the kids from Proxima Centauri. Dr. Santos added with a smile. "She's particularly excited about showing them how to build snow angels." David laughed, remembering the 8-year-old who used to color quietly at the kitchen table while he worried about paying rent. Now she was preparing to host the children of beings from another star system. In the evening, David sat alone in the small apartment he'd built next to the observatory complex. It was modest compared to what he could have had. The collective had offered technologies that could have made him unimaginably wealthy. But he'd learned something important over the past 6 months. Purpose wasn't about what you accumulated. It was about what you contributed. On his desk sat a framed photo of Sarah, taken during her work on Project Deep Echo. She was smiling, looking directly at the camera with the expression he now recognized as someone who had seen the future and wasn't afraid of it. "We did it," he whispered to the photograph. "The kids are safe. Humanity is safe. And they're going to grow up in a universe more wonderful than we ever imagined." His computer chimed with an incoming message from KL7. David had grown to think of the collective representative as a friend, despite never having seen their physical form. "David Mitchell, we have received confirmation that 3 additional species in nearby systems have achieved the technological markers for potential contact. The Collective Council has unanimously voted to request that Earth serve as the contact coordinator for these species. Your unique perspective on the transition from isolated to integrated civilization makes you invaluable in these situations." David smiled. A year ago, he'd been a struggling electrician who couldn't keep up with his bills. Now he was being asked to help guide other species through first contact with the galactic community. But the real transformation hadn't been in his circumstances. It had been in his understanding of what mattered. He'd spent months after Sarah's death consumed by grief, feeling like the universe was hostile and random and cruel. He'd believed that loss was just loss, that tragedy was meaningless, that the only thing that mattered was protecting what little you had left. Now he understood something different. Sarah's death hadn't been meaningless. Her sacrifice had made possible not just first contact, but the specific kind of first contact that preserved humanity's autonomy while providing protection and growth opportunities. Her research had ensured that when the moment came, the decision would be made by someone who understood that love, not fear, was the foundation of any relationship worth having. Her grief had become his purpose. Her loss had become humanity's gain. And every day, as he watched Emma and Jake growing up in a universe full of friends instead of enemies, learning alongside beings from other worlds, preparing for futures he couldn't have imagined, he understood that Sarah's sacrifice had been worth it. The most profound discovery at the Cedar Falls Observatory hadn't been the alien technology, or the communication arrays, or the spacecraft orbiting Earth. It had been the understanding that loss and purpose weren't opposites, they were partners in the dance of meaningful life. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the deepest pain. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you're just trying to survive. And sometimes, the key to the future is hidden in the love someone left behind. Anyone can change the world if they're willing to trust that their pain has purpose and their love has power. As the sun set behind the Colorado mountains, David Mitchell, former electrician, current ambassador to the galactic community, sat in his modest apartment and looked out at the stars. Not as distant points of light anymore, but as neighborhoods where his children would someday visit friends he couldn't yet imagine. The man who had once bought a building for $200 because he needed a roof over his children's heads had become the architect of humanity's greatest adventure. But more importantly, he had learned that grief, when transformed by love and purpose, could become the foundation for hope. The universe was vast and wonderful and full of possibilities, just as Sarah had always believed. And now, thanks to her sacrifice and his choice, it would be full of them for generations to come. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories of ordinary people who discovered extraordinary purpose in their darkest moments. Click to join us on these amazing journeys. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that love is stronger than loss, and that sometimes the most broken people become the most powerful healers.